So the next item on the agenda is the Marketplace Redevelopment Project Shellmound site.
Welcome back. These chairs are much more comfortable.
Okay, so this is the third consecutive month that we have a marketplace item in front of us for consideration. I'll start my presentation with a little bit of background, briefly talk about the project proposal. Our design consultant, Arnold, will be giving us the design analysis. I'll show you some pretty pictures, talk a little bit about transportation assessment that was done for this, then the findings that the commission needs to make, followed by the recommendation. So now we are talking about Parcel A. FTP. The Parcel A FTP, currently it is a surface parking lot, and this will be the third building in this third FTP for this proposed build out. As I had mentioned, Parcel C was approved in May, and Parcel D, the theater site, was approved last month. So Parcel A, we've had 3 study sessions in the course of a month and a half, a year and a half, and in terms of next steps after tonight would be the tentative map decision, which is tentatively scheduled for next month. So the proposal has not changed much. It is 167 residential units with 14,000 square feet of ground floor retail. There'll be parking associated for the residential development and as well as bike spaces. The breakdown of the unit mix is in front of you. We have, in terms of 2 and 3 bedrooms, it's over 50% of the total is 2 and 3 bedrooms. This is the rendering. You've seen this before. There have been slight modifications, mainly refinements that Anna will walk you through. So essentially, you do have a building which has 2 building forms. The northern end is a taller one, whereas the southern end is a little shorter at 50 feet. Through it is a connection to the pedestrian bridge. It's in terms of a form of a grand staircase that comes down, meets Shellmound Street and connects the railway tracks. It is an interesting building. These are the sections. We have 2 levels of garage and a ground level of retail, with the northern end having 5 levels of residential, whereas the southern end is 3 levels. So the way it's configured, so as I mentioned, the southern end is 50 feet and the northern end is 80 feet. And we have 2 courtyards. One is the lower courtyard, and the other one is the higher courtyards. And here you see this is the bridge walk, and we'll see more renderings of that. So in terms of site circulation, Shellmound Street is at your bottom. Along Shellmound Street is the ground floor retail. The main lobby to the building, the residential lobby, occurs off Shellmound Street, as does the bridge walk that I had mentioned. In terms of vehicular access, they occur on the north and south end of the building. One in red, the red arrows are the vehicular access points. You also have at both ends loading for retail as well as residence. Trash pickup also occurs for both, separated by retail and residential at both ends. As you go up, the building, this kind of shows you the ramps that go up, and the pedestrian walkway on the bridge onto the bridge walk, which this kind of gives you the bridge walk direction. And this is connected also with the buildings, both the northern building, the northern portion of the building and the southern portion of the building. In terms of building amenities for the residents who would be occupying this building, there is a dog spa and a bike shop at the ground level. The roof level, there is a portion of the roof which is covered with planting. That's about 7,600 square feet of that, as well as 700 square feet of roof deck. As I've shown you the courtyards, there are 3 courtyards. One in the north end of the building and the 2 at the southern end. And at the north end is a sun terrace, mainly with deck and seating area, whereas on the southern end there is a area for the kids to play, as well as dining and seating areas, as well as what are they calling chill terrace with open space with seating areas. So this is sort of the landscape plan which was a part of your packet. Here's your bridge walk, here's the northern portion of the building, and this is the sun terrace. This is the lower terrace on the southern portion, and this is the upper level family activity terrace. It has the kids play area, here's the dining and the seating areas, and there I believe is also a community chalkboard wall. So I'm going to hand over to Arnold. He will walk you through the design of the building, and those are the different components. So and I'll be back after he is done.
Hello, my name is Arnold Mamarella, and I'm the city's design consultant. I've noticed some new faces here for me, and I'm just going to go through 4 sections. The first is very brief. It's just some informational for the public and you who maybe are still getting familiar with the project. It's quite complex. And then talk a little about the exterior design issues, then the bridge walk, and then some of the units. And again, we were working with the developer and architectural team, working through a lot of these issues since the last time that we saw you on this, and responding to the comments that you made, plus other things that we saw along the way. So this first slide just shows their drawing of their axonometric drawing, and you can see that there's the larger and the lower building, and you can sort of see in this drawing, well, kind of the general sort of approach to how they've approached this project. They've tried to take these large pieces of a building and use some articulation of the facades to sort of break them down and differentiate them. And of course, you see more in the other slides the sort of verticality around the bridge walk that differentiates it from the rest of the facade. This one also shows the extent of the street along Shellmound, the retail. Just to briefly go through some of the plantings again, the pink area is the retail. Between the 2 pink areas on Shellmound is the leasing office, and the start of the steps going up to the bridge walk. The parking is behind, with you can see with the access to the sides of the project. The podium level is here just shows you the basic kind of arrangement of the buildings in the courtyards, very similar to the other drawing you saw. We'll come back to the units and the buildings in a bit, but this just shows you how the buildings are arranged around courtyards and these the bridge walk in the middle. These are the same sections that we showed you a moment ago, so I won't really go through repeating them again. And on the exterior, again, we're going to look at some pieces here. We'll start with the rendering showing the access to the bridge walk and the main kind of architectural features of the building. You'll see one of the things that they've done since the previous earlier reiterations is they've really worked on developing how these tall elements will kind of look, and you'll see that there's a lot of kind of manipulation of balcony locations and things like that. So this tall element is kind of playfully stacked up in space. Also, you'll notice there, we'll come back on the bridge walk, the elevator. That's been developed with a sort of a facade that includes some layering of metal, kind of a metal mesh over it. There's 2 buildings. On the left is the 2-story base, 5 stories above, and then on the right is the tall 1-story base and three stories above. The next elevation shows that lower building as you kind of enter the whole marketplace project coming along Shellmound. And what's happening here is they've kind of eroded the corner, or at least visually eroded the corner, and they've sort of created these 2 decks that kind of fly out in space, and it really sort of provides almost a gateway feature for coming into there. You also notice that there's glazing kind of wrapping that corner at the entry level for the retail, so that retail sort of wraps that corner, it just doesn't die at the corner. And then the fiber cement panels that the architect can speak on more as they see appropriate. You can see how there's different colors of them, but the strong red color is sort of wrapping on the outside face, and then the windows are kind of set back in. Probably hard to see. You've probably seen the drawing in the package. This is more of a enlargement of that area by the entry. And I think the thing to call attention to here is the mixing of the materials, where they have a recessed zone. They've sort of substituted a kind of a horizontal wood appearing kind of board that sits on a furring, so that it has sort of a change of color and depth to that. You also see there's some ins and outs on the upper facade. Obviously, the decks, you can really see them coming in and out on the side view too. But then all the way to the left is their section cut through that wall. You can see that there's a 3-story bay that pops out like 2 feet. So, and that's at the same level of the terraces. So there are some sort of playing with sort of this fairly shallow dimension, but making things pop in and out. So this overall height and mass of this building doesn't seem like it's just a big wall with windows punched into it. You also notice these decks. They're very they just have simple glass appearance, and that's one of the detailing challenges to this project that we'll get back to in a minute. And then the outer face of these wall surfaces are either cement board or they're the smooth coat finish that you see on the material board, which doesn't have any texture. It's very smooth. I think I want. This is just to point out that other wall I was speaking to a minute ago on the lower building. You see the red cement board, and you see how it creates these giant kind of holes in it. And this is only like 4 inches out, and some places it's a little deeper, but it does sort of break down the scale of the overall building and allow for places to organize windows and decks within it in sort of a interesting pattern. Here's kind of the challenging part. The center drawing shows the glass railings, and you notice once you get past the image of these simple glass elements, you notice that they have to be built with certain detailings, attachments, and things like that. And one of the challenges is going to be how to make those pieces kind of disappear as much as possible. So on those key parts of the building which have these glass railings, we're going to want to continue to work with the architect, and it is a challenge to figure out how to make those disappear as much as possible. Right now there's a kind of a base and a top cap, and then there's a sort of a metal shape on there, and not really sure how they're all going to quite come together to look quite as clean as the images on the renderings. One thing they are doing is rather interesting, is they're using color glass and other things on the sides of the rail to liven it up a little bit more. So that's interesting. Over to the left is railings elsewhere on the project, and they're using the color just so you know that some of the interiors of the courtyards are transitioning to metal railings rather than the glass railings, but they're kind of keeping the same overall appearance. The drawing on the right is the awning. It's fairly standard retail awning. This one just shows those walls which go back and forth, and they're working on kind of fine-tuning the detailing. It's fairly, I think it works fairly well at sort of giving you multiple layers and scales on this facade. The back of the project, as you come across the pedestrian bridge, it takes on a much different character. I know there's been a lot of discussion, and this has changed several times. Right now, it seems like what's happening is there's much less window, and of course the corridors on these residential buildings are along that outside wall, so you don't have units facing the railroad, and they've sort of kind of use the basic ideas, but maybe enlarge the scale and develop those to provide color and pattern that will create some lively appearance from that viewpoint. This is just the drawing that shows as you come across the bridge, and again, I know there's been some signage changes and stuff like that. You can get a view of that. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go through that quite so fast. So they're using that wood kind of composite material here to sort of give some articulation.
Arnold?
Yes.
I'm assuming that the applicant will be speaking a lot to their design. I'm wondering if you could tell us some of the staff recommendations that you have.
Yes. Very limited staff recommendations on the outside of the building, mostly going back to the railings and things of that nature, the detailing of those elements for the outside, to make sure that detailing is consistent with the appearance of the elevations and the rendering, so they're clean and not a lot of mechanical fasteners and other parts that sort of make it sort of look different than it is, and mechanical vents, things like that. So from the exterior of the buildings, generally it's looking like they've come along. They've met a lot of the concerns that you've had. You might have additional comments on the track side and things like that, and the signage, but generally speaking, few comments about changes or conditions of approval. The bridge walk. Here there are a couple comments. Here you see, as you come up the stair, obviously you're much higher in space. We really wouldn't see it from that point of view, but you see the overall appearance. And you see here how they straightened it out from earlier ones that was more kind of zigzagging around. We do have some concerns here. There's not a lot of information on the gateways that go into the courtyards, how transparent they are, things of that nature. These wind screens, what they're going to look like. And so those things we would like to be able to look at in more detail. This rendering shows kind of looking back towards, I guess, Shellmound coming off the bridge, and they kind of imply some wood with wire mesh kind of things at the courtyards. It seems like this has kind of not been developed, or some things have been lost. Previously there were some large red sort of elements that were like upside down gateways, and I don't see where they are. So it seems like there's been something lost at the top of the bridge before it was very lively, and now it seems to be sort of kind of a simple landscape pathway. So we would like to go back and look at the design of the windscreens and some of those other elements and see how they're going to look and if they can be reintroduced. And this just shows you the elevation there, and you can see it's mostly the facades of the building. Oops, sorry. The units, they've been working to make the units. We've been making a fair amount of progress. Some of the units, in terms of the family friendly, they've done about as best as they can do to reorganize the units within the limits to make them. B1.1 is still a little weak. You're walking from the bathroom through the kitchen to get to the bedroom. The living room is a little small. The dining room table works in space, but there's, it's an allocation of space issue when you're entering into the kitchen. It's not really the best arrangement.
Is B1.1 meant to be one of the family-friendly units?
Excuse me?
Is B1.1 meant to be one of the family-friendly
Yes.
units? Okay.
Yes, all of the units are intended to be family-friendly. B1.2, some similar issues, but you don't have the walking through the kitchen to get to the bedroom. And then B2, it also, you're kind of walking by the kitchen. This one works a a little bit better. Now these are the very rectangular units. Most of the units are have odd shapes, which usually work out pretty well. One of the recommendations is to take that B1.2 unit, because of the dimensions of the unit and the general layout of where the deck is, and to substitute a unit like B2.3, which allows for a little more defined areas, a little more efficient use of the area, but the overall dimensions are very similar, so we thought that this unit could be substituted. There's nothing in the A building that like this unit. It seems to work pretty good for that type of overall width and overall depth. So that would be one of the recommendations, to look at adapting B1.2 to something like this. And this was one of the ones on the parcel D. And it has a little more defined areas for the dining area, a little more efficient, and you still have the island in the kitchen, and it kind of flows fairly well. The one other issue to talk about of the units is, as these units were developing and we were finding spaces to put the furniture so all the furniture fit in, what happened was something rather interesting, is that a lot of the units ended up with kitchens that really faced out into the living areas. So on B3 you see the living area, and there's a dining table, and there's a kitchen as a single wall there, and then on B4 you see the kitchen sort of a single wall, and the living areas to the back of it, with the dining area to the side. So the furniture all fits, but you have a situation again here in B6 where the living areas are actually kind of integrated with the kitchen. Now, we never really contemplated this type of arrangement when we did the family-friendly guidelines. We had units where dining rooms were in kitchens, like the eat-in dining room, but not quite this arrangement. So this presents more of a design challenge that I think would be good to discuss and have your input on. Is, what should those kitchens look like? The applicants are already aware that we talked about this earlier, and they might have some ideas on how they will address this, so that it's not a typical type of kitchen facing into a living room. This is just the rest of the units. One thing to note is the townhomes are now two-bedroom townhomes, so that gives more family-friendly units off the bridge walk. And the three-bedroom units, they've been worked out, and so what you notice is in most of these units now, you're seeing the ample space for dining tables, a little more efficiency in the layout. I think that's it, and unless there's any questions.
Any questions?
So in the summary of changes from the study session, there's a comment that the dark glazed brick finish was removed from the retail facade and alternative options are being studied. So that's still an open question?
The material board shows that the material is that dark glazed.
It didn't look
brick.
Glazed, though.
It's unglazed, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, there was a metal
Like a
facade.
Another.
Oh, that
There.
one. Yeah.
So, Arnold, can you use the microphone if you're going to speak? There's a portable mic there.
Why don't we let the architects discuss that in their presentation?
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that also, that
This.
they might have some additional information on why they ended up with that.
Any other questions? Thank you, Arnold.
Thank you. Okay, so as with the last two buildings, I'll be showing you some photo simulations. This is the location from Powell Street Bridge existing, and with the buildings. That is the building. You will note that these photo simulations include the buildings that have been approved by the Commission. So this little orange is Building D. And it will also include Parcel C, the grocery store, as well. This is from the Powell Street Bridge. And obviously you can't see the building at all, but you do see the grocery store and the theater building. This is the view from north from Shellmound Street, and here is after. South going on Shellmound, and you see the building in the foreground. This is from Christie Avenue. Obviously, the building is not visible because the grocery store and the residential would be in the way. This is across the tracks. And you mainly see at this, from this view corridor, the grocery store, and the building is right here. So a traffic study was also done as part of this project. The traffic looked at the overall build-out as well as the site circulation for this particular building. And it found that in terms of the overall, the current trip generation, the traffic volumes of the build-out is consistent with what the PUD and the PDP approval was. In terms of overall site circulation and loading and parking at build-out and during different conditions of phases of construction, that was also looked at. There are some conditions of approval that are included from the traffic study, and that is related to loading, vehicle movement within the garage, and some recommendations for the TDM for Parcel A, and these are all included as conditions of approval. We do have our traffic consultant here if there are any specific questions regarding circulation or anything regarding the total traffic generation. In terms of the findings that need to be made, the findings that have to be made is to see whether it conforms to the general plan and whether it is consistent with the approved PUD that was approved by the council in 2008. So the general plan designation is mixed use, where both residential and retail uses and associated parking are permitted. The two findings that you have to make is that it conforms to the approved PDP and that the changes and the conditions of approval that were specified in the original approval have been met. So we believe that the project does conform to the approved PDP. The original PDP allowed for a 14-story, 175-foot building on the northern portion and a 50-foot building on the southern portion, and it would accommodate 206 units with 14,725 square feet of retail space. As you know, the building is slightly shorter on the northern end. It is consistent at the south end, reaching 50 feet. Number of units is slightly less than what was originally approved, and so is the retail space. So we believe that the proposed project is consistent with both the type and the scale of development that was allowed by the PDP. Also consistent with the PDP is that the project provides for the pedestrian bridge connection as was approved and envisioned in the 2008 approval.
Excuse me, Maru.
Yeah.
Will the pedestrian bridge be out of service during the entire course of construction?
I believe the idea is that it will not be. There will be some ways of making sure that there is some connection at all times. This has to be worked out. We will know more about this next month when we bring in the tentative map. That's the time when these connections as well as all the roadways in the PUD will be discussed. So we'll have a little bit more information regarding what will happen during that construction, but it's not been worked out at this point, but it's a work in progress.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Is it appropriate to make that part of a condition for the FDP if we do that tonight, or is that going to be a condition for the tentative map?
I would suggest that you wait till the tentative map because I am not sure exactly. Our public works director has been in conversation, but where they have landed, I'm not sure. So it would, since he's not here today, you can still make that condition at the tentative map during that time as well. Okay. And we'll make sure that we will, when we bring in tentative map, that this issue is addressed. And so we'll have some better answers at that time. In terms of the overall PUD, the build-out that is being proposed is overall a little bit smaller. As you can see from the table in front of you, residential units is pretty close. What the main portion that is missing is the office space, and the retail space is all slightly less. But the intent of the approval is being met, and that was to replace the existing surface parking lots and create mixed development over a longer period. Actually, it was envisaged to be 25-year, and the revised proposal does create buildings of mixed-use development on the existing parking lots. They just tend to be a little bit smaller. So we do feel that that the overall project is consistent with the PUD as well as the conditions of approval. In terms of conformity to the Shellmound design guidelines, this is not very clear, but I'm sure the applicant will have a clearer graphic for this. So as you know, in this case, there is either a transit bus shelter or a parking lane. So when that is proposed, the guidelines say that there should be a clear pedestrian walkway width of 8 feet with an overall sidewalk width of 10 feet. So what we have here is a pedestrian walkway about 11.5 feet next to a cycle track, and then you do also have a bus shelter right here next to the travel lane. So where the bus shelter ends, there is a parking lane instead of the bus shelter, and the pedestrian walkway is consistent with, at that point, it's 10 feet of clear walkway. In terms of environmental review, an EIR was done for the PUD in 2008 as a part of this FDP. A checklist was filled out, and it's attached to the staff report, and which confirms that there have been no substantial changes to the proposed project or the circumstances under which the project will be undertaken, and that no new information of substantial importance exists which would require preparation of a subsequent EIR. So that concludes my presentation. We are recommending approval subject to the conditions of approval as outlined in the staff report, and there is also a memo that should be in front of you. This is essentially regarding the subdivision approval. It is more in the nature of cleanup of the language rather than anything substantive. So if there are any further questions, I would be happy to answer. Otherwise, I believe the applicant does have a fairly extensive presentation.
Chair Gunkel, before we go into the applicant's presentation, I do have a couple other minor edits to the conditions of approval, which I wanted to bring to your attention, if I may.
Are there any questions for Maru? Or?
I can, but I can wait. If you want to do this first, or
sure.
Thank you. We had some last-minute edits to the conditions, as you can imagine, and they didn't make it into her memo, so I wanted to bring them to your attention now. On page 13 of the conditions, this is relating to the pedestrian bridge and easement. Staff is proposing to remove the word or words "or enhancements" to that sentence.
I don't know. What's it say?
And on page 17, this is page 17 of the conditions. We are proposing to amend the condition as follows. The purpose of this is essentially to, this is some wordsmithing and some clarification.
Here it is, number 2.
So those are the amendments that were the further amendments to the conditions that we're proposing as well. Thank you.
And before you're done, does the applicant understand these changes? And
yes, we've gone over these changes as well.
They agree with them?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
Could you leave it up there for a minute? We're still looking at it.
Oh, sure. Sorry.
Chair Uncle, while they're looking this over, would it be prudent for me to go ahead and ask my questions to Maru?
Go ahead.
Maru, I just had one question. In the staff report on page 8 of 10, there's a mention of the design and materials of the gates, fencing, and screen that the city's architect also mentioned. And my question was developed before he had Arnold had gotten up to talk about these things, but is the only problem with it right now is that they're not fleshed out, there's no design? Or I was kind of asking if someone could explain what the problem was, but it seems like the problem was that they weren't identified. So is that the question? Is that what we're questioning?
Yes.
Okay, so if they come up and they can possibly explain if they've fleshed that out a little bit more for us?
Yes.
Okay. Then I also have a question for Fair and Peers, and we could do that now or whenever it's convenient. And this is just really simple. I couldn't figure out the problem that you were bringing up, and I couldn't visualize it. So in the attachment 6, the memo on traffic assessment, which is on page 3 of 39, you have a recommendation to modify the retail loading zone apron. So there was some like pedestrian conflicts or something. So can you explain the foreseen problem and how you see it being corrected?
Well, based on the plans, excuse me, that we saw, it looked like the driveway apron to the loading area would slope down such that, let's say, if you were in a wheelchair, you may not be able to get around it without sort of tipping over. So maybe that's something the applicant can clarify.
Okay, so the slope would be if you were on the pedestrian right-of-way walking.
Yes.
Suddenly the apron drops off?
Yeah, so there was only, I think, 2 feet on the plans that I saw.
Okay.
So perhaps they can
Okay, yeah, that is a problem because I experienced that today. I have back issues, and I stepped off of a curb like that, and it sent a shock up my back. So now I see that a lot more, and I know that's a problem. So we want to see that as a smoother transition, correct?
Yes, we'd like to see at least 4 feet in that area that's sort of all at the same grade. So if somebody's walking their bicycle, or if they have a stroller and they're trying to get into the backside of the parking garage, or
they're not hitting a big grade change.
Exactly.
Perfect. Thank you.
While you're up here, could you maybe speak to the crosswalk and kind of why you don't see it being feasible at the base of the stair, or what it would take to get it located at the base of the stair, and what modifications would be necessary?
Yeah, the problem with locating it at the base of the stair is that on the northern portion there you have 2 very closely spaced crosswalks, and then it's a much farther distance for people to walk to the next crosswalk on the south side. So we're trying to keep an equidistant spacing of crosswalks.
I'm just going to get a graphic up. It might be easier.
Yes.
So this is.
Yeah, so the question is, with this crosswalk here, why don't we have it located across here? One of the primary reasons is that we do have a crosswalk that's located just right over here. So you'd have 2 very closely spaced crosswalks, and then if somebody, further south on Shellmound would like to cross the street, it's a little farther to go to the next designated crosswalk. So we're just trying to prevent jaywalking, because I'm sure that will occur. So we're just trying to provide regularly spaced crosswalks. There's also some concerns with there already being a lot of hardscaping on the west side of Shellmound Street that would have to be modified in order to accommodate moving the crosswalk.
Any other questions for them?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm still on the crosswalk. This was a point of concern for me. I appreciate the equidistant issue and that people will look for the nearest place to cross, but the vast majority of the pedestrian traffic that's going east to west is going to be going over this bridge and down this staircase, and that's all centralized around the lobby and the activity areas. And I'm just not convinced that this actually solves the jaywalking problem. I actually think that it invites it, because we're inviting people onto a transit island, and visually that's what people are going to encounter coming down the stairs of this structure. I see people jaywalking as a result of this, actually, and I don't think that the north crosswalk that's up next to the parking drive is actually that close in relation to this proposed crosswalk. And so I'm just wondering, I appreciate that there are not diagrammed on here on the west side of Shellmound Street. There are fixed structures you talked about, but this is probably my largest concern for a number of reasons. One, in one of the attachments here, which we'll probably get to, it does with the applicant. there's no, through phase 2, there's no plan at that large crosswalk to have any type of signal. It's an unsignaled crosswalk. It's the largest crosswalk on the street, and it is, on both sides of it, there are planters with trees. So we're inviting pedestrians to cross both a bike, cycle track, 2 lanes of traffic where there's no visibility and there's no signals to stop or slow traffic. And so I'm actually not, I appreciate what your study shows, but I'm actually not convinced that this is the best place for this crosswalk still. And so I guess my question is, if the crosswalk needed to be moved back towards the staircase, can the transit island be redesigned in such a fashion that the bus is far enough down that it is not immediately, the crosswalk is not immediately in front of the bus? And maybe there's someone else who might be able to answer that. It sounds like maybe with a little more detail, but because I appreciate not wanting the crosswalk in front of a bus, but I also believe that we will have people doing it anyway because it's not proximate to where people are going to be crossing naturally.
Yeah, and then keep in mind that the northern intersection will be signalized with a pedestrian crossing, and there will be some barriers along here, so it will be somewhat of a visual, oh, I shouldn't cross here unless I want to go to the transit island. There is also a signage program that the applicants can speak a little bit more to as well to direct people.
But it sounds like the question is, what would it take? If we directed, if we made it a condition of approval to place the crosswalk at the base of the stairs, what modifications would be necessary and can they be achieved?
Well, we'd need to make sure that from where the back of the bus is, we have about 40 feet in the front, because that's about how long some of the transit vehicles are. So then that way the back of the bus would not be blocking the crosswalk.
Mm-hmm.
Can you remove the 2 parking spaces that are north of that to accomplish that and move the front of the transit island farther up? Or is that better off?
That's better for the applicant to answer.
That's fine.
Shift everything.
I'm just thinking to move it all up.
Are there any other questions for the traffic engineer while we have him up?
I have a statement about that, but I'll save that for my turn.
And are there any other questions for staff? Would the applicant like to come up and?
Good evening once again. Welcome, new commissioners. My name is Tom Cox. I'm the architect for the project. Oh, thank you. Thank you. So this has been an interesting process. I would say it's been rigorous. And this would be our third, we had 3 study sessions, and this is our FDP hearing. We've also worked extensively, I think, with the city architect, Arnold, and it's been a good relationship, and we've probably had a half a dozen meetings with Arnold and numerous meetings with staff. From the very beginning of this project, I think it has evolved tremendously, and I think we've made great headway, and a lot of changes have been made holistically to the project, wholesale redesign in one case. And I think at this point we've come to a point where it's a very solid and a very well-based design. The issues that have been brought up in the 3 study sessions is what I'd like to discuss tonight. I believe the presentation by Maru and by Arnold pretty much covered a lot of the issues that I will talk about. But the study session key points were essentially, in the first study session, which caused the wholesale redesign of the project, was making a direct connection from the bridge to Shellmound and essentially dropping the height of the south building down to 50 feet to meet the intention of the original approval. Those have been accomplished. The east elevation also in session 2 needed further development to introduce more playful southwest corners. Key component to this, and it has been for all projects that we've been working with, the addition of more family-friendly units and the definition of what that means and how do we accomplish that. And then finally, straightening out of the bridge walk and adding a green roof. And that was the second session. The third session was to provide a minimum of 50% 2- and 3-bedroom units and improve the layouts of those units to be more accommodating to family friendly. The second part was to improve the connectivity of the corridor of the south courtyard by creating additional points of access into the courtyards. The third was to look at alternatives to the shed roof at Shellmound, just north of the Grand Stair. And then finally, the refining of details along the Shellmound elevation. We've undertaken all of those issues that were brought to mind and all those design considerations. And the first one I'd like to address is the family-friendly units. We are currently at 51.5% 2- and 3-bedroom units, and we believe that these meet the intentions of family-friendly, and they really cater to the diversity of toddler to teenager in terms of what families are. This is a compendium of the floor plans. Arnold has already presented those, and I believe he has some comments that we'll be doing further discussions with Arnold and with staff to improve these units and to bring them as much into conformance as we can. The points of access, we have increased those points of access to the courtyards, and we've also illustrated where light comes into those courts and natural light, especially from the railroad side. We have actually quite a bit of glass back there, and that glass flows down all of the courtyards, and there's multiple points of access for each building. The bridge, the tower, the gateway tower, we agree. The shed roof is a little dated, and we went back and got to reinvestigate that. And it actually gave rise to the idea of creating a smaller version of that vertical element on the southern building. So we're using a wood-like material with a deep set so that it has shadow and a variety of color, and we use that to line and create a much stronger vertical element at that gateway part of the building. We've also gone through and looked at the materials. I know that there were considerations of whether the cementitious board had a sheen to it, higher quality. We have replaced that. We have taken the sheen off of the brick and replaced that with matte finish. And we've introduced some colored panels to kind of give it some liveliness to the building. That's the presentation that I have. I apologize for the two new commissioners not going all the way back to day one, but I will spare you that. And I look forward to your comments and any input that you have.
I will note for the record that I've provided Commissioner Bowders and Kang with all of the previous staff reports as well as links to the videos on all the study sessions on this item, so they should be up to speed.
And I'd like to just ask that our architect and traffic consultant come up and address the Planning Commission with regard to the crosswalk issue you just addressed.
Bear with me. Hi, my name is Aaron Ashley with Hart Howerton. This has just been a little out of sync with preparations for the tentative map meeting, and so some of the work that we've been doing with the master development team is a little, it's all reflected in the drawings that you've been reviewing. It's just been presented in different ways. So we have been working on exhibits that are more kind of thematically focused on the transit hub and the streetscape, and you can more so than the team from Parcel A. So I want to start by, a lot of these date back to our December session with you, and I want to turn it over to Jeff Tumlin from Nelson Nygaard, but I just kind of want to start with this. Going back 2 years, we've had a number of community meetings and a number of meetings with you all, and time again, it's about connectivity and how do you connect across the tracks in meaningful ways. And the pedestrian crossing, the bridge, had different orientations over the last couple of years, and where it's landed lands at a point in the block which is north of the current crosswalk. The current crosswalk is approximately where we show it today. And most of the connections that folks in Emeryville, at least this neighborhood of Emeryville, make are beyond the market to the residential buildings over here, or into the heart of the public market, whether it's through to PPP and neighborhoods to the north, or is part of this new experience. And so, a big motivator, it's not the hardscape on the other side so much as it is how do we connect in a meaningful way. So on this side, it happens to be where, and I can zoom in here, happens to be where there's already a ADA ramp and a staircase. So this is the crosswalk today. It lands at a ramp that comes up to the upper level where Guitar Center and Urban Outfitters are. Here's a stair. To us, this was the landing place of a crosswalk that started to be meaningful. It supported people cutting across to the neighborhoods to the west. And if you were truly interested in going north, you'd walk along the gracious sidewalk we're putting in. Or if you wanted to go south, you'd walk along the sidewalk. And so this was really about getting across. Mm-hmm. And that's one component. The second component, of course, is how do you manage all the aspects of an intermodal transit. And so, quite candidly, we're trying to balance the demands of pedestrians, buses, bicycles. And so this location where the hand is was identified for the bike share location in this area that would link between the two transit hubs. As you know, Emery go-around is not able to it doesn't have the equipment if there's a wheelchair, so it takes up to 5 minutes to load a wheelchair, whereas AC Transit can do it quite quickly. So the two spaces to the north of the AC Transit are identified for Emery go-around to pick up passengers. So the Emery go-around and AC Transit are not able to share a station. That's those agencies' desire. And so, you find yourself in a position where a block's only so long, and how do we create the maximum amount of connectivity? And that's how we landed here. But kind of the specific design of this and the configuration, I'd like to leave this to Jeff to talk through a little bit.
Okay, can we go to the desire line image? Where's that? There, that one. Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Jeff Tumlin. I'm a principal with Nelson Nygaard Transportation Planning based in San Francisco. I've been working for the project team over the last year on refining these designs. So there has been a lot of investment in this one block. This is one of the most complicated blocks we've ever had to design, and there are many factors that we're trying to balance in order to make this block work. So one of those factors is absolutely the location of the stair landing. The location of the stair landing says that the crosswalk should be located at the base of the stair landing. A couple of other considerations, though, as well, which is the spacing of the crosswalks relative to the intersections. Ideally, the spacing is relatively even and not too close to a stop sign or signal-controlled intersection. Very importantly is the goal of having this site be an important transit center. So we need to accommodate stops for AC Transit, Line 26, and Emery go-round. Those two buses have different design requirements. For AC Transit, which has low floors, they work best both for transit delay but also for safety to actually stop in the traffic lane because they can board and passengers very quickly, including wheelchairs. Emery go-round, on the other hand, takes a long time to board wheelchairs, and we're expecting this will be an important location for the Amtrak station for boarding wheelchair passengers. That needs to happen in the parking lane, out of the traffic lane, in order to eliminate the delay in the travel lane. Another consideration that we want is to have the crosswalk be behind where the bus is stopping for safety reasons. As the bus driver is looking over her left shoulder to merge back into traffic and make sure it's safe, if there's a pedestrian walking in front of the bus, that can create a safety problem. So ideally, we have the crosswalk on the back side of the bus rather than in front of the bus. The other very important consideration is not just what's happening on the east side of the street, but what's happening on the west side of the street, and really what are the pedestrian desire lines. Ideally, you want to have the crosswalk accommodate the perfect pedestrian desire line, and that's what this little drawing here shows, which is effectively, a lot of diagonal patterns. And so as we look at the predominant patterns, both west to east and, very importantly, east to west, the existing intersections, the proposed signalized intersections, as well as where the crosswalk currently is, end up really being the best solution for accommodating all of the pedestrian patterns. This is a case where there is no perfect design solution, but keeping the crosswalk roughly where it is better accommodates the east to west pedestrian flows, both from the surrounding neighborhood as well as for the buildings that are on the west side of Shellmound. It accommodates the bus stops, including separate stops for AC Transit and Emeryville round. It accommodates the crosswalk in the safest location behind the bus stops. And it provides the crosswalk evenly spaced between the signalized intersection. So it's our strong recommendation that the crosswalk go where it is proposed. Were the commission to have a condition of approval to move the crosswalk to the foot of the stair, it would require a complete reworking of the transit center aspect of the plan, and it would also require a reworking of the crosswalk landing on the west side of the street, including changing the existing landscaping and regrading to accommodate wheelchairs.
Just kind of a couple last points. So in December, we actually shared these projects with you, and every municipality is a little different, and so our bus shelter will look a little different. Our fencing will look a little different, but the general idea is that there's a tactile paver strip that protects pedestrians from entering into the bike lane. It's clearly marked like this. The bike lane would be clearly demarcated. And again, I don't want to spoil what we're going to talk about next month, but in large part it was to really configure that. So on the north side of the street, the stair lands to the back of the bus stop. Of course, we've made connectivity straightforward. We would expect that the signage program would be very obvious, and the landing at the base of the stair at more than 13 feet starts to create room for people to loiter and not bump into one another. There's obviously a generous space. We have looked at the tree spacing. This is about 12 feet. Is it right? I think we've looked at it and our consultants have looked at it. We think it makes sense, but certainly there's room for further consideration, and whether or not we need mid-block flashers as a condition of the Fair and Piers report based on study. This section of Shellmound moves pretty slow, or at least it will. And, all the litany of things that Jeff raises. So we do think we've brought a lot of thinking to bear on this, and obviously everyone has opinions. But anyway, I don't know if you have further questions based on this.
I mean, on the west side of Shellmound, the main staircase to the promenade for the public market is directly across from this staircase, based on this diagram I'm looking at in your...
That's a biofiltration planter. That's not a staircase.
This isn't a staircase right here?
This is it right here.
Oh, they look like they have striations like a staircase.
Here's the picture.
I see it now. Okay, that's fine.
And the ramp that gets up to that upper level lands here. So relative to the existing crosswalk, we're sort of a matter of feet from that. If you register these stairs here, and then I go back to this diagram, Oops, sorry. Lost my mouse. You can see the crosswalk coming in again, so that the ramp up is right here. And then the bike share would be right here, next to this other ramp that goes over towards Christie Avenue.
Are there any other questions for the applicant?
There's not a question, but would it be appropriate to add my comments now, or do you want to wait till we get into that part?
Yeah, can we?
I really want to refer to one of the drawings that he's shown in here, so if we could bring that back up.
Yeah.
At the time?
Sure.
Okay.
I have one more question. I have one more question for you. I'm sorry. Just a technical question, because it's probably in here. I just don't have it in front of me. The distance between the north end of the transit island and the north crosswalk, how far is that?
And the north crosswalk, sorry?
Yes.
Great question. The distance from the crosswalk to the crosswalk is 195 feet. I'd have to do some quick math here. Sorry, from here to
about where you're about
to the next crosswalk, it's probably about 100 feet.
Okay.
So there's a plus or minus 46 feet of room for the Emery go-round, the stormwater, and then the crossing.
Before you go, I want to have a follow-up question from earlier concern brought by Commissioner Bowders. Could you show a picture of in detail that shows the crosswalk as you're proposing that connects east to west, so we can have a visual?
East.
It shows both sides of the street.
Yeah. In more detail, because I want to point out a concern that Commissioner Bowders had about the planters.
I don't
go back to the bike.
I don't know that I have that drawing.
It might have been with the staff visual as well.
It wasn't this one.
Yeah, well, this is good enough, I think.
Okay.
On the picture on the left, I believe, please, Commissioner Bowders, disabuse me if I'm incorrect in stating this, but he had a concern about the planters on the grate. That's fantastic. Yeah, which are pointed right now on either side.
Here and here. Yeah.
Yeah, that being an impediment to oncoming traffic for the pedestrians. Is there some kind of height that we want to say, or just have grass there? What do we envision there so we can minimize that?
Well, yeah. So that's a great question, and for your benefit, having not been in part of this long-going conversation. So we took great lengths at the outset of the project to find true canopy trees and to put the conditions in place to create true canopy trees on Shellmound. And you know, if you know anything about the soil in this part of Emeryville, that doesn't come easy. So these oaks, which are planned for here, are intended to have a high canopy to support the retail visibility. So the idea is that although there is the trunk of a tree, the leafy portion is certainly clear and creates good visibility. So if I just go back to our diagram quickly, the triangle is our goofy landscape architecture version of, saying, a tree trunk. And then the dots here and here are stormwater planters, which are low grasses. So in terms of, you know, visibility, the trunk of the tree is at risk of, you know, if anything would mask a visibility of a pedestrian, it's the trunk of a tree, but it's not any kind of shrub or anything.
And the trunk of the tree would be no different than a utility pole or traffic signal pole, which you would also find at an intersection location like this.
Do you have a ballpark width and height of what we're talking about, the middle planter section?
This square is 8 by 8, and boy, I'm out of my depth. I would say the tree trunk in this location, Commissioner Donaldson may help me, is never going to be more than 18 inches, but that's probably a lifetime away.
And I think that there's something probably in one of the reports about the height of planting along with sight lines, that you have to have things lower than 3 feet or higher than 6 feet so that there is a clear visibility as people are approaching a crossing point.
Yeah.
So is it appropriate, Mr. Chair, to ask Mr. Bowders if that somehow, does that add details to your concern or alleviates concern?
It does. It gets me halfway there. The height piece was a piece of it, but the second part of it is even a canopy tree for the retail purposes you named are fine, but when you look at the shadow studies that were also submitted for this, I mean, there's a good portion of the day, especially for about half the year, where this part of the sidewalk is covered, especially in the afternoons and evenings in the latter half of the year. And so the only street light is behind this tree to the north side of it, the only street light that's diagrammed, at least. And so in the absence of any signals, any street light, that is going to occlude any light being cast on a pedestrian standing there. And so while I appreciate that there may not be a visual impediment from foliage itself, I think that there's still, I have a concern for pedestrian safety around an intersection like this. It's just, it's missing some pieces for me to feel comfortable with it.
Understood. I'll just say, and again, this is a challenging part of the process. The lighting study and the photometrics and the exact placement of light fixtures is unfortunately part of the tentative maps submission, which covers all streetscape and not the building. And so although it's great for me to hear this before I resubmit that package next week, it's also kind of unfair to put that on the building quite yet. I mean, I realize they're one and the same. The one thing I'll point out is these circles here indicate building-mounted pedestrian lighting, and so we are lighting the sidewalk. We are, from both sides of the street, looking at the appropriate placement of light fixtures to make sure we have the visibility in the right places. So I get that this looks unsatisfactory, and I promise that's what we're in the midst of totally resolving. There's been a lot of moving pieces.
Are there any more questions for the applicant?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
And I would, if you might as well leave this up, that's great. That said, are there any members of the public who would like to speak to this item? Nope. That said, we'll close public comment and start with Commissioner Stepp. Steve?
Okay. Let's see. Just one question for the project team. And is exchanging the apartment unit, the B2 unit that Arnold has a problem with the B2.2 out of the parcel C, is that a viable option, or does that cause some problems? Is this something we could consider?
I think, if I'm not mistaken, I'm speaking for Arnold, but I think it was the ideas that were in that unit to transpose those ideas over to our unit. The sizes are a little different, but I think it's the idea of how that unit operated as much as it was the actual physical size. I think the parcel D unit is a little bigger, a little deeper, so we're going to have to do some, manipulation. But I think it was the big idea, and it was putting the kitchen in the middle and putting the dining area back, and I think that was right.
So these are viable options that you guys are working on that we don't need to make a condition?
I wouldn't do it as a replacement, because I think that would be an issue, but I think the intention of that unit being integrated into the A unit, I think that's fine.
And that's something you guys are going to work on?
That's what we're going to work on, exactly, yes.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
So, as usual, and I'm sure as expected, I have a few comments. So, first of all, I want to express my, I'm very happy with the project as it is, as we're being shown. Let's see. I want to thank you for adding the window in the dog spa and in the townhouse units as you guys did. I think those are very successful. And I think Arnold made some appropriate points on the balconies. I just want to make everyone aware of the issue that we've had in Berkeley recently, that I think the more paramount thing about balconies is safety. And I think if we have to build some stronger supports for those glass things that tend to be stainless steel, that aren't really simple and clean, but yet make the railings safe and secure, maybe we could look at those as jewelry onto the glass compartments. But I think the foremost thing we need to do is make sure those balconies are secure and safe. And if it means that we have a little bit more visual clutter on there, I think that's better than people falling off of balconies. So I just want to bring that up. I'm very happy with the eastern elevation facing the railroad tracks. I'm fine with the signage that is on the building. I don't have a problem with the dark brick. I don't know if many people had the opportunity to see the colors that they're painting the tower currently, but it is going to have darker colors, and I think it's going to work well with the brick. I really would not like to see a red or any color like that on a contemporary building of this nature, but I think showing the brick materials is definitely going the direction that we want to go. So on to the transit and transportation issues. I would have to say that it sounds like I might be in the minority here, but I am in total agreement with Fair and Pier's report and with Nelson Nygaard that the relocation of the sidewalk or the crosswalk being in a mid-block is not desirable. And just to give you a highlight of someone who lives in the neighborhood, the red line coming, actually pointing towards PPP, but coming from PP, that red line is the exact line that John and I walk when we go to the bridge from here. I mean, that is it exactly. If we go to the F bus, which is under the Powell Street Bridge, we take that exact red line to where it intersects with the other two lines, and we continue straight across that sidewalk. So if you look at the way this shopping center is designed and at its build out, if someone took those stairs straight across, they're going to dead end. That is not where people want to go. Or if they do, it's a very few people, because it just goes basically to Guitar Center and Urban Outfitters. Where what this does, and what we need to do is look at the build out of the project with the site. I know it's that site B where they do the more retail. More people are going to come off that bridge, turn right, and go shopping, or at least that's where we would probably want to direct them so that they spend their money in town and we get the tax increments or the sales tax. But I understand the whole point of how people come down a stair and they look and they just look straight across. But when they see the building there and that there's maybe 2 or 3 shops there, that's not really where they're going to go. And for people who are using this as a cut through, the blue line takes you to the end of the public market, which is a staircase and a ADA ramp that takes you to the backside. So you're going to cross the street, then you're going to turn to the right anyway to go to that part. So it's better that they're directed that way into a safe direction. If you're going to the other side of the market, to the apartments to the north of that red line is exactly how you're going to walk. You're not going to come across to the dead end and then cut across. The entry to the public market is where that crosswalk crosses in the red line. That's where the main entry to the public market itself is. So although I understand the line of sight and people come down the stairs, when they reach the bottom of that stairs, they're going to see a brick building. And though it may have some attractive things to go to, 90% of the people taking those stairs are not going to those 3 specific things. So I think this is a very complicated thing. I think the best situation, and when they say that it takes the immigrant 5 minutes to board a wheelchair person, that's fast. I've timed 15 minutes. And to have someone blocking that lane for 15 minutes is going to be a nightmare. So I think this is a little issue. I think that we have professionals with Nelson Nygaard, we have professionals with Fair and Pier's whose business this is, and I think we've paid a lot of money for them, and we need to listen to them. And it's not worth throwing the baby out with the bathwater just to do that. So moving onward, I support Fair and Pier's recommendations in both Attachment 5, the Transportation Assessment Report, which has 25 recommendations, and Attachment 6, their memo and assessment dated July 15th of 2015, which has 9 recommendations. I would support all of those recommendations going forward. I'd like to voice a strong support for Recommendation 4 and Attachment 5 that large trucks should not be allowed on Christie Avenue. By my suggestion, no tractor trailers of 45 or 50-plus feet should be on Christie Street. Only bobtail trucks or smaller should use Christie. All larger vehicles should use Shellmound. Thus, the curb bulb outs at Christie and 63rd would not have to be redesigned. Additionally, I strongly support the recommendation number 6 and attachment 6 in support of the AC Transit Easy Pass for all residents. I believe that eventually I'd like to see this as a standard condition of approval, not something that we go forward with on a case-by-case basis. Furthermore, on the unit mix, I'm very happy with the unit mix to the extent that the project meets our family-friendly guidelines. I am not in total agreement with the city's architect consultant regarding the unit's open kitchen nor seemingly dual master suites, and this is why. Open concept floor plans are a highly desirable style today. I believe most people would say that when they entertain, everyone seems to hang out in the kitchen. So no one usually seems to be overly concerned about a mess in the kitchen when they're entertaining. I think this project provides a broad variety of floor plan styles, 21 to be exact. Additionally, some people like their kitchens next to the entry. It means easier loading in of their groceries, for one thing. But in any case, someone who doesn't like an open kitchen or a kitchen next to their front door certainly has other options within this project, and that's the beauty of this project with 21 different floor plans. Regarding the dual master suites in this project, there are 86 2- and 3-bedroom units, and not all 86 are going to be occupied by families with school-age children. I'd like to keep options open for others, by example, families with only 2 people who would like semi-private space for their guests, or a family of an elder parent who not only needs but would desire some sense of privacy. So this kind of dual master suite thing is not always a bad thing. In the Bay Area, less than 25% of the population are families with children. So we need to factor in these other families and the demographics of families who don't have children but yet are still families. And a desire of many types of families, this project currently accommodates everybody's sense of a family. So I think we need to keep that in mind in supporting what they've done. They've come a long way in creating our family-friendly guidelines, even though this project isn't governed by those. And I think it's a good faith effort. So I think I could find for both findings that we need to do for this project.
Commissioner King?
So I'd like to begin by just first commending the work of the city's staff, as well as the applicants, as well as the city's citizens in terms of providing all this great feedback over the course of these many months and years. I'll try to keep my comments very brief, just to limit it for the sake of time to 2 main points. Just want to first of all reflect on and echo the concerns of the City Council in terms of making sure we have a vision towards creating more family affordable housing. I do want to recognize that the applicant, in terms of the evolution of this project, has gone above the 50% threshold in terms of its technical definition of creating more family affordable housing. I think the applicant should be recognized for that. I am concerned, though, that the creation of more family affordable units was done through converting and enlarging the 2-bedroom units instead of converting the studios and the 1-bedroom condos to be made larger, to be more family friendly. So I want to state that just for the record, because that's a factor that I'll personally be looking at in terms of what will be important in terms of creating more family affordable units. Are we creating more units, quite frankly, that have more bedrooms instead of these studios and the 1-bedrooms? Secondly, in regards to the transit island, largely echo the comments of Mr. Keller. I think there's a lot done. There's a lot to balance. There's a lot of variables there. And I think on balance, it manages to take into account aesthetics, safety, pedestrian flow in the best way possible. So that's it.
Commissioner Dons?
I'm also okay with the location of the crosswalk. I think it makes sense, and the one that made the most sense to me was the desire line diagram, because when you're coming, I appreciate the idea of having a grand entrance to the staircase, but if that's not where you're coming from or going to, it doesn't make sense. So I would support keeping the crosswalk where it is for that reason, because I think that's the direction that people are going to want to go. I am not really worried about the lighting there. I think the lighting is something that will get worked out, and the visibility is not going to be much of an issue there. If the ground floor is retail, there's going to be light coming out, and the buildings will be lit, the sidewalk will be lit, so I think it's going to be an okay situation. I would like to see the applicant continue to work with the city staff and consultant about all of those areas that were identified, about the screens, the fences along the walkway on the upper level, how they transition between the courtyards and that walkway, the visibility of the transparency of the windscreens, and all of those different gateway elements along that walkway. And also with continuing to work to get more family-friendly unit styles. And the reason, generally, I think that there is plenty of place for the double master bedroom unit styles, but we're so oversubscribed to those in the city already that I think that we're trying to play catch up and really create more opportunities for families, because there are way more than enough of these single adult room sharing kind of situations. So I think working with the family-friendly guidelines and continuing with that. And I do appreciate that you've gone to over 50% when you weren't really, technically with the PUD approval, that wasn't one of your requirements, but glad to see that you did. Another area where I would really like to see some continued work is the terraces, the courtyards, because there's additional access on the southwest corner to that lower courtyard in the lower building, but it seems to be a really awkward access. It's pinched. It would be nice if it was more open, if there was more visibility between where the circulation area is into the courtyards. It seems like it's a little funnel right now. The upper area, one of my continuing issues with the courtyards is a conflict between the C3 requirements and usable space, because a lot of the courtyards that we have are filled up with these 4-foot tall planters that are not, I can't define them as open usable space for enjoyment of people. It's a visual, it blocks the traffic flow, it feels pinched, and it's problematic. And I think that in the courtyards, they're fairly generous sized courtyards, but 15 to 20% of them is taken up by these planters that are not usable space, that are not I think that we actually need to look at the way that we calculate usable space on sites, because the C3 planters just keep impinging on that. And a couple of examples on the sheet L2.1 is that when a couple of the areas where you enter the courtyards, you're entering between these planters that are, you're being funneled into the area, and I find that really awkward and kind of uncomfortable, and I would like to see more work done on that. There's also on the north or the southeast corner, I don't understand why there's some areas where there's about a 2-foot clearance between one of these biofiltration planters and the wall of the unit in the courtyard, and I think that those areas need a little bit more work. I'm wondering whether maybe some of the C3 requirement could be taken up where the dog run walkway area is, because that's a 5-foot place between a garage and a wall, a fence or a wall, and the railroad tracks, and that doesn't seem like a space that's going to be used by anybody for anything. Maybe there's more opportunity to transfer some of the stormwater requirements there. I'm not sure whether you can do that because of just the physical logistics of it, and I also don't know whether there's some kind of access requirement that's being satisfied by that 5-foot walkway, but a 5-foot walkway between a 50-foot building and a railroad fence doesn't seem like an inviting place. What else? I did actually have a question about the location of the motorcycle parking on the second floor of the garage, because it seems like the motorcycles would be the noisiest things that you've got going in there. And if there was a place where they could go where they weren't driving up ramps, it might be a little bit less noise pollution there. And I also noticed that in the conditions of approval, I think that the traffic report recommendations, the title needs to be corrected. It doesn't have the correct date, and it doesn't have the correct title on there. And that's all I have at the moment.
Okay. So I guess I'll open by saying it's very difficult to come into this role having not participated in the study sessions that you diligently participated in. So I want to thank you for all the work you did, because to come and throw a wrench into something you've been working on for a long time is a very difficult thing, and I appreciate that. And I do, having followed, to Charlie's point earlier, I did watch or follow what's gone on, and so I know that you have made a lot of progress on this. So I have 3 general comments. I want to first echo some things that Commissioner Keller said. I actually agree with you on pretty much everything you said. I'll be very brief on that. The transit pass, I think, is a very important thing, and I'm very happy that we have that. I wish it was everywhere and not just for 1 year. And I totally agree with him on the open floor plans with the kitchen. I would respectfully disagree with you, Arnold, on this point. I think that is a more usable, it makes space more usable. As somebody who entertains in my professional life on a regular basis, I prefer and seek opportunities for an open floor plan. And so I think that while there may be some people who are accustomed to having compartmentalized kitchens or kitchens cordoned off like that, I think that's fine. And I'm actually a huge fan of some of the larger bedroom units that you've designed here, with the exception of C2, which the master bedroom, in my opinion, in a family unit of 3 bedrooms should always be near the front door. It should not be the farthest place in the unit, so that when people come to the door, it's not children answering the door or they can't hear someone at the door. That's my comment on C2. So I would agree with Commissioner Keller. And, my thoughts on the crosswalk, I'm going to, I came here pretty convinced that I didn't like it. But I will be honest with you that it was you, Commissioner Keller, who brought me around on that, because believe it or not, I'm open to reason. And it makes sense. I think what you're saying makes sense. I do have one thing I would still like to see. I think that there should be pedestrian lighting, street lighting at that crosswalk. It may be true that there's going to be ample building lighting. It may be true that we can move the street lighting. As somebody who's a pedestrian who doesn't drive, who walks to the Amtrak every day for work and walks the city on a regular basis, there is not enough being done for pedestrian safety in this community. And I've witnessed multiple pedestrian incidents, and so I just think that we need to do something. So I would strongly ask my fellow commissioners to consider, as a condition of approval, adding a requirement that be a street lighted or pedestrian activated crosswalk. Other than that, the big issue I have, which has troubled me the last day and a half, I do work on affordability. And I was very pleased at what was an opportunity to build units that are affordable to low and moderate income people, and build them as part of an integrated structure. And I'm not here to critique or comment on the parties in the development agreement negotiation or what the consequence of that is, other than to say I'm really disappointed that we are not building the units inside this project. I'm really disappointed in this. And I didn't participate in those conversations, and so it's very hard for me to judge. But I think that the City Council has made a very good point. We're building retail, we're building places where people who have hourly wage jobs work. They need to be part of this community too, and that doesn't come from the simple economics of supply and demand like some people would let you believe. That sometimes requires doing things that further that type of socioeconomic integration, and I'm I'm really torn about this because I think this has come a long way. I think that this FDP is, on the whole, a really good thing. But I'm going to take the counsel I'm getting from staff that this is not a directive from City Council, that their decisions on that were not a directive to us to do anything specific on the issue. And so I'm going to ask the developer to not abandon the concept of a development agreement. I know that this is very fresh for everybody, but I would really, really implore you to go back and really work on this issue. I know that may sound crazy to you in your position in the time that you've had since this happened, but this is a really important issue, and I would really ask you to not abandon that. That's all I have to say.
Sure.
Yes.
I agree with Stephen on his points, and I've been involved in the study of this thing for years now, and I think it's vastly improved. I do agree with Gail that there's not as much usable space in these courtyards as I think there should be. Other than that, I think the thing has come along very nicely.
It seems like I'm maybe outnumbered, but I still feel like the crosswalk, when I'm walking down that stair, walking over the bridge, walking down the stair, if I want to go to any of the shops across the street, I'm making a beeline right across there, and crosswalk or no crosswalk. So I just like to see it there, but it doesn't sound like it's going to happen. I think that I think we need to think about this in terms of not how we navigate the space now, but how we will navigate the space when it's a double-sided retail corridor, and not simply a place that we might swing by on our way from point A to point B. And I think that's, I guess, where my belief that the crosswalk should be at the base of the stairs comes from. I don't remember exactly how we abandoned the public market sign on the east side of the development and how it got replaced with the development sign, but I feel like something got lost there. I remember reading through some comments about the public market sign where people felt that it was, as long as it was artistically done, sort of a landmark type sign, that could be a great thing. Public market sign is an advertisement to the public that this is a public space, that you can move through here to get to a public space. The AVA sign almost seems like it's saying you're entering into a private development. And so in my mind, I don't know how that got changed, how we lost the public market sign and ended up with an AVA sign, but...
Can I tell you why? The city attorney, Mike Biddle, said it was illegal to use that there because that's putting advertising for the public market on a private building. So he said we couldn't do that, and I had suggested rather than saying public market, say marketplace. Mm-hmm. And he kind of rolled his eyes at that.
Michael, do you want to...
If I could chime in.
Please. Sure. Please.
We have a new city attorney. And under the planning regulations, it's actually the planning director who's empowered with interpreting the planning regulations on the advice of the city attorney, obviously. I think we might want to revisit that public market signage issue at some point in the future.
So is the signage that's on here, because the AVA is painted on the, or at least portions of it are painted on the panels. Is that...
If I may, similar to your direction on the approval of parcel D, we have an explicit condition of approval in our recommended conditions that says no signs are included in this approval. So that includes the AVA sign or public market sign or anything. Any signage at all would need to come back for separate approval. It might be able to be done at a staff level depending on what it is, but this application does not include, or this approval does not include any signs as we have written the conditions.
Thank you. Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Donaldson regarding the courtyards, the C3 planters. I'm guessing they are counting as public open space or community open space. It's unfortunate. I think that that's something that we may want to address, or I'd like to maybe see addressed in the future. Also within the courtyards, I see that there's a barbecue in the one, but other than that, as far as adult amenities go, it seems like it's primarily just seating. And it seems like it takes more than just seating to bring adults to courtyards, especially since I think for most of these courtyards, by the time people get, during the weekdays, by the time people get home, they're going to be in the shade. I don't know that they're going to be places that people are wanting to go to pop open their laptops and hang out. Probably going to be pretty cold. I think it needs to, I think there need to be amenities that bring people into those courtyards, and it'd be nice for that to be revisited to a certain degree. When I look at the garage in the south, I think I brought this up a while back, but the south garage ramp still seems like it's an accident waiting to happen. It seems like it's a blind corner where those cars entering and going up are going to barely be seen by cars coming back around to go out, and they have to cross each other. So I don't know if that's something that's been looked at in traffic reports, or I know it's been looked at to a certain degree, but it seems like it might need to be revisited. Other than that, I did see that the existing elevator tower is shown on the first and second floor plans, and I'm not sure if that's some allusion to this whole need that, or idea that the elevator and the bridge are going to remain functional during the construction of this project, but I would like to know what happens during the construction of this project. It seems like it is a component of the design of the building more than it is a tentative map question. So I don't know if it could be a condition of approval that the bridge and elevator access somehow remain functional during the construction of the building. I don't even know exactly, if that's even feasible.
If I may,
sure.
I think, just speaking as a layperson here, but I think it seems pretty clear that there will have to be some period of downtime, which we would obviously want to minimize, but they're going to be reconstructing that tower and sort of integrating it into this building, and whether it's structurally part of it or not part of it, that they say it won't be, so I take that as their word, but they do have to really kind of rebuild the whole thing. Sure. And I would imagine that during that process there will have to be some period of time when people won't be able to use it, but obviously we want to keep that to a minimum.
Yeah, and I doubt anyone in this room knows what that minimum could be at this point in time, but it'd be great if that was worked out so that it's in the more a couple weeks to a month range than year and a half to 2 year range, and I think that's going to take some real strategic planning. As far as the unit designs go, I do think that there's still some work to be done. I trust Arnold and staff to work with the applicant on the designs to sort of narrow in on something that works. As far as the open kitchens go, personally, it depends on your definition of an open kitchen, but I've always found that if you just have a kitchen all along one, running in a line along one wall, the residents or tenants end up putting in their own version of an island or peninsula, because they naturally want something to turn around and use as a work surface. And so if you don't have that, then they're going to end up putting something in there, and then the dining room table is going to be somewhere else, or they're going to do that with bar stools and it's going to be the dining room table. I don't know. I know it happens sometimes. Sometimes it's hard to really create a kitchen that isn't just along a wall, but I really would love to see the kitchens be more U-shaped kitchens at least, or peninsulas or islands. Those are my comments.
I had one question I forgot to ask. The bike rail that the bikes go up and down the grand staircase on, is there only one of them?
It's double.
So there's somebody going up is not on the same one as someone going down?
They're on either side.
Either side. Okay, thank you.
So,
So what are the things that we really want? I mean, could we, the courtyard, there's some big issues, I think, and I agree with you on them, and I don't know how much the stormwater treatment is causing us problems. So is there a way that we could state in our approvals that the developer work with staff to try to improve those spaces?
Hi.
Do you want to
Yes.
talk at that? Okay.
Hi, I'm April Phillips. I'm the landscape architect, and I'd love to address a couple of those questions. Okay. Yes, C3 planters are probably the biggest challenge in any development these days because of the restrictions on the kinds of things we can do for stormwater. And in this location, we can only use bioretention and flow-through planters. We can't use any other kinds of storm water management devices. So we're stuck with that. So one of the challenges we're doing is looking at ways, because we do have the ability of the two different, the changes of grade in this building from the north to the south, is there are some areas that we are going to be able to, we're exploring lowering the heights because we have more depth to the structure. So in some areas we will be able to do that. Another articulation we're doing is we have this thing called the origami planter or chair, which is a folded bench system that will be sort of the integration between maybe a lower planter or between the higher planter and the paving. So it feels like a social nest, and it's kind of climbable. So it makes the taller stormwater planters, which are roughly about 44 inches at the moment, sort of disappear and then be part of the topography. So we're looking at creative ways to make them more fun, because they are kind of not fun, but they're very purposeful and do really good things. So we also are going to probably do some education on that, because it's really good for people to understand why we're doing it, since it's so pervasive. I want to also address some of the courtyard things that we're doing that we probably didn't put enough labels, but we have fire pits on all the layers. We are also going to be using heaters. We're exploring both heaters in the trellises as well as heaters in lower areas, because it is colder in Emeryville, and we do want people to come out. We have a lot of dining tables at barbecue on every terrace, so there was tables and chairs, not just for seating. We're also looking at things like, in some of the play areas, things like floor Scrabble, so things like Twister and those kinds of things. We see this as a fun place to have those kinds of games, because there's big surfaces enough to do that. And then on the lower terrace, we actually have a wall between, we've got 30 feet of grade change and 17 feet between the terraces. So utilizing them as amphitheaters, in a lower terrace, we're actually going to have a movie wall because we have a wall surface there. So hence you see the stairs come down and they turn. They become ledges so people can do movie and do popcorn, and we're trying to integrate them. We'll continue to work with the architects on the access in to make them less awkward, and then we've got a couple of other ideas that we're exploring for, again, the stormwater, like I said, is the most challenging thing. I also want to address the windscreens. We're still developing those things. We're working with this is in the bridge. The effort of straightening out the bridge, which was the direction of the last time, actually caused more complications for wind, because we have a very strong wind pattern on that 30, we're up 30 feet in the air. So we were asked to create these baffles and angle as much as we can, which you'll see some of those angles that we originally had, but we have very much open space. So how that articulates, whether there's arms like we did in I think one of the first things we did, we had some archways. We're still looking at that because of the grade changes and so on and so forth. But those will be things that we want to make fun, interesting. The wind is a concern as well, because a lot of public is working through there, and we have we have an understanding of what the regulations are, the requirements are to have perforations in it, make it interesting, work with the patterns of the building. So hopefully I have addressed most of your comments about the courtyards, but if there's anything else, I can answer them.
What about the 5 feet that Commissioner Donaldson
yes.
was talking about?
Very important. We originally we came up with an idea to do a grate over there and do stormwater management below. However, we can't do planting underground, and so we met with the city and met with the stormwater manager of the city, and the idea we came out, while it was well received, it would take going to sort of a state agency for C3 regulation, because it is not a C3, in order to do a stormwater planter, and it's not biofiltration unless there's plant material, unless we get a variance, and that's a very complicated process that we don't want to go through, and the city doesn't want to go through. So we've all decided, okay, I guess we can't. We did change it to permeable pavers, because that gives us some stormwater, and believe me, we're putting permeable wherever we can to get rid of our C3 planters. So it's a constant juggle. We'll continue to do that. We do have stormwater planters at the base of the building that are kind of in the overhang, so we are channeling water back there and doing the permeability, but we need to maintain walking space. So we couldn't make that whole thing. That would have been great. That would have given us about 1,000 square feet of stormwater management if we could have done just planting, but we just couldn't.
So there is an access requirement?
There was an access requirement, and fire, it's sort of like an emergency access out of the building. So.
And the fences that we see along the walkway that are currently, they look like they're just chain link framed.
Yeah, they won't be chain link. That was just, I think that was an artistic interpretation by the renderer. I'm in working with the architects, we're thinking there's going to be some wood slats, it's metal. The goal is to keep it low, define property that's private, because this is like a street. This is a muse, it's both public and private. So it's to give the stoops a sense of their own entrance, but also for the public to know, oh, that's really nice street I'm walking along, but I don't really go in there. It's not to be solid. It would be some kind of see-through transparency. Likewise, the gateways, there would be some trellises, and again, we haven't worked them out in more detail, so hence they're just labels, but we do see that space we want people to see in, actually. We want the light, so we're not going to create walls that would you wouldn't see the courtyard, then they're hidden. The idea is you see them and you get the light and the air, and it's very inviting because we'd want people to even, come be tenants there. So it's a great marketing tool, Thanks. I guess, for us. So anyway, so that's our idea there, and we'll continue to work that out.
Thank you.
It won't be chain link. All right, thank you.
So I'm wondering if we can sculpt some conditions of approval that delegate what we feel comfortable delegating to staff, and I don't know if somebody wants to take a swing at it.
Well, I would make a motion to approve as recommended with these conditions. So what do we want to really get staff to work closely with them regarding the courtyards, the fencing, the C3s, the access points, and do we feel comfortable leaving it in their hands and leaving it at that, and is there anything else we want to add to that?
Well, the unit, I think, continuing to massage the unit designs, the kitchens, the one unit in particular that seemed a little, the B1.1 or whatever it was.
We have that in the conditions already.
Okay.
Okay.
They're continuing to work with us and Arnold to massage the unit designs is something that we've included in the conditions.
Which one is it?
Okay, so what about the courtyards, yeah, and the wind screens and the fencing?
The condition about the unit design is on page 24 of the conditions. It's number 10 at the top of that page. Oh, and building design changes is page 9, number 9 on bottom of page 23.
And what does that address?
Go ahead.
All right, so there are two conditions regarding design. One is related to the exterior of the building, and that's on page 23, number 9. And then the other one is on the next page, and that is specifically regarding the unit design changes.
Okay, so we're comfortable with that, I think, but what about the courtyards, the fencing, the windscreens? Is that anywhere, or should we add that too?
That is on,
That should be added.
it is in number 9. Access gate to courtyards and townhomes, fencing along the courtyards and wind screens. Yeah.
It isn't there, yeah.
So you think, Gail, the language is satisfactory?
I heard something about adult amenities in courtyards.
Well, yeah.
So that is not included.
Yeah, and
That's something new.
I'd like to see that added.
So what do you, I mean, they're doing the...
Well, I think it's more that they're not showing up.
Oh, okay. So maybe what they had talked about
Yes.
should be
Yes, that
added
should
to
be-
that?
Mhm.
Okay. So can we add that, Maru, to that same section, that the
movie
adults
wall-
amenities that were
all the
discussed
fire
tonight,
pits,
yeah,
the-
were to be included?
I think it would be, I think what we heard was a list of possible options that they're thinking about.
Yeah.
Unless they know that they're going to do that, then we can refer it, say, movie screens, what have you. Otherwise, I think it may be more appropriate to use, something to the effect of having adult amenities, which may include.
Yeah. And I want to make sure that they don't get watered down and become sort of token adult amenities that.
Neither do I.
Okay.
Thank you.
So is there anything else, anyone else like that?
Yeah, I have a couple. I mean, on number 10 on page 24, I'd like it to say unit design for B 1.1 and 1.2. Because based on the,
Okay.
yeah, B 1.1 was farther out of compliance with family-friendly guidelines than 1.2 anyway, so I'd like it to say both of those. And I would still like to add as a condition of approval in the appropriate section as determined by staff that the crosswalk be lighted, not street lighting, that it have illumination where, just like we have on Horton Street, where you can push the pedestrian button and the strip across the street lights for a period of 25 seconds or so. I'd like to have that as a condition of approval for the crosswalk that's going to be just not off of the main staircase.
Public property is.
I'd just like to note, well, yeah, it will be a public street, but we've found that those are not real effective. You can't really even see them very well in the daytime. Well, what we're going to now, what cities are going to now is what they call rectangular flashing beacons or something like that. If you've seen around the Ashby BART station and the, what's it called? The
Ed Roberts.
Ed Roberts, thank you. Ed Roberts campus on Adeline Street. They're very bright and they're much more visible. They're what we're putting in on San Pablo Avenue at 43rd, 45th, and 47th as part of our Safe Routes to Schools project. So can we make it a little more general and say, crosswalk lighting, warning lighting to be determined by the Public Works Director or something like that? Is that sufficient?
Yeah, I would. How about, can we make a little more specific and say consistent with what we're doing on San Pablo?
Sure.
Okay.
Any other massaging of the conditions?
I'll make a second with those conditions.
Okay.
Did you, as long as you got the correct reference to the correct reference to the traffic recommendations, yeah. So there's, who seconded?
Yes.
Yeah.
Shall we do a roll call?
Okay, just let me make sure I've got that. We're adding B1.1 unit number to the unit changes. We're adding adult amenities to the condition about building design. We're adding crosswalk lighting consistent with San Pablo Avenue. And was there another one?
We are correcting the title of the traffic report in the condition of approval.
Okay.
To be clear, consistent with what we're going to do on San Pablo, not what we have.
Yes, we understand.
Just to be clear, it's a nightmare right now.
And the amendments to the conditions as staff had earlier highlighted.
Correct, that's in part of my motion.
Thank you.
Okay, I heard a motion by Commissioner Keller and then a discussion about all of these conditions. Commissioner Cardozo, when you just said second the conditions, did you mean you were seconding the motion?
Right.
Okay. So on a motion by Commissioner Keller, seconded by Commissioner Cardozo with the amendments that we've just discussed. Commissioner Bowders?
Aye.
Commissioner Cardozo?
Aye.
Commissioner Donaldson?
Aye.
Commissioner Kang?
Aye.
Vice Chair Keller?
Aye.
Chair Gunkel?
Aye.
6 ayes, the application is approved. This decision may be appealed to the City Council within 15 days.
Okay, that leaves us commissioner comments.
Welcome, new commissioners.
Yes, welcome new commissioners. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Meeting is adjourned.
Good job, Brad.